What is good, gamers? Thank you for taking a break from your 3-hour Instagram Reel Goon session to hear me talk about Resident Evil Village. Now, there's not a lot of people out there who would consider Resident Evil Village to be a perfect game in any way, shape, or form. Well, maybe shape. Before we get into the meat of this video, I wanted to make it clear that this isn't at all a defense of the game, or a claim that it's some underrated gem. I'm very aware that Village had pretty great reviews at its release and was talked about positively by the majority of people online. In fact, I remember seeing a lot of scores around the 7 and 8 range, with the very occasional 9 out of 10 thrown in there. So all this to say, I know that Resident Evil Village has definitely gotten more than a Peter Parker Spider-Man 2 amount of flowers. It should also be stated, because I feel like someone in the comments is going to say something about it, but I love Resident Evil 7. I've beat the game numerous times, the DLC is phenomenal, and 7 is an absolute banger. So please don't take this video as shade thrown at Biohazard, because that's not the goal here. In this video, I would like to specifically highlight the things that I personally think are a step up or an improvement over RE7 to really emphasize why I think this sequel is truly something special. I got a lot to get through, so let's move on. A lot of these points are going to be easy to argue about whether or not it's an improvement, but I feel that this one is straight up undeniable. The enemy variety in Resident Evil 8 is vastly better than what was offered in RE7. Biohazard has 3 or 4 enemy types, and that is being generous. Basically, it's just these homies over and over again. You have the goop guys, the upgraded goop guys, the chunkier throw-up guys, and if you want to get extra technical with it, there's also these really stupid bugs in the Marguerite section, but who's counting that? Simply put, there's more variety of enemies in the factory section of Village than RE7 had in its entirety, and I love the enemies in this game. The different lichens, ghouls with helmets and weapons, creepy bats, Terminator robots with drills, jetpack Terminator robots with drills. Basically, there's just a ton of cool enemies in this game, and it's always been something that I think it does a lot better than Biohazard. Sorta in the same realm as my last point, but I also think the boss fights in Resident Evil Village are a huge step up from Resident Evil 7. I do love the 3 face-offs against Jack Baker, even if the garage fight is mostly a cutscene, and the chainsaw one has always been just a little bit janky for me. But what some people forget is that you don't even get a real final boss fight in Resident Evil 7, and that has never sat well with me. Slowly walking up to Evelyn, fighting a wall, and then being dropped a dope gun is significantly less cool than having an actual final boss. The boss fights in Village, however, are super varied, really fun, even if they are a little bit easy. I'm a fan of the sniper shootout on the rooftops with Big Mommy. The sad Swamp Boy's acid rain is pretty cool, and I love the arena that you fight him in. The Lycan's gang leader is super dripped out in a really fun fight. And this ultra-charged ceiling fan is still to this day the coolest thing that I've ever seen. Whereas Heisenberg's mech fight is one of the dumbest things that I've ever seen, but it's also pretty cool. The real highlight as far as Village bosses go will always be Mother Miranda. I actually think this is one of the best final fights in the entire series, and I mean her design alone is so cool. I don't have as much to say in this section other than the combat just feels really good in this game. Ethan's military training finally taught him how to move quicker, we get a sniper rifle, the shotguns feel great, automatic pistols towards the end of the game are dope, and the upgrade system is ripped straight from RE4, which is a wonderful addition. No flamethrower though, which is a bit of an L. I will admit that I'm an absolute sucker for anything in terms of gothic horror. So as much as I love the nasty, spooky Southern trailer park vibes of RE7, I really mess with Resident Evil 8's environments. And you can't tell me that after playing that game you don't want to book a trip to Europe. Well, let's just hope in your case that your experience is a little bit different than Ethan's, or else you'll get your wife shot, baby stolen, and bonked on the head by Chris Redfield's SWAT team. I thought I'd shut up for a little bit and let the environments speak for themselves, but I really need to talk about how good the hub area is, because the village itself acts as a constantly evolving hub area, which has always been incredibly cool to me. It's so much better than the little camping trailer in RE7 that you go back to a few times. The village has something new for you every single time you return to it, and even after 6 playthroughs and almost 100 hours that I've poured into this game, I still feel like I'm finding cool secrets and hidden areas that I didn't even know existed. In this next part of the video, I really wanted to highlight the different main sections that make up Resident Evil Village's gameplay. And when you think about it, almost all the Resident Evil games are split into a few distinct sections. A perfect example of this would be in Resident Evil 4, where you have the village, the castle, and the island. In my opinion, all 3 of those sections are pretty awesome, and that's what leads to me replaying Resident Evil 4 40 times a year. That was not a joke. Resident Evil 4 isn't the only game with great sections though, because I think Village has one of the most consistent batches in the entire series. So to not spend too much time on this bit, I'm going to break down what I think about each of them in a couple of sentences. The castle is phenomenal. The pacing is perfect, the floors are all banger, and I like 10-foot vampire mommies and their daughters just as much as the next guy. But unlike so much of the internet after the game's release, I wasn't at all disappointed that there's more game and more characters after this opening section. House Beneviento is a brilliant horror segment and absolutely one of my favorite parts of the game. Ethan's fears of being a father and a husband physically manifested in a way like this is unreal and not glazed enough if you ask me. And the baby segment is scary enough to make a grown man sleep with the lights on. As for the Swamp Boy bit, listen, it's the best worst section in a Resident Evil game. It doesn't overstay its welcome, riding the boat is dope, and I like the fast-paced puzzles and the more cinematic bits a whole lot. The lead up to the factory gets its own bit here because it's essentially just Doom Eternal. As for the factory itself, I've always really enjoyed this area of the game. I love the labyrinthian layout of it all. I love that it constantly introduces new enemy types, Australian Magneto is awesome, and the steampunk vibes are off the charts. I know it's not the case for everyone, but I really enjoy every single section of Resident Evil Village, even if some are better than others. And although I really do love Biohazard, I think for me it ends up being less consistent than its sequel. The boat section especially overstays its welcome and is always something that makes me slightly less excited as I get to the final third of that game. Let's talk about Village's narrative, because I really do think that the story and voice acting are a big step up over Biohazard. Ethan Winters' voice actor, Todd Soley, does a much better job this time around. He sounds way more interested, way more passionate, and really sells some of the more emotional moments towards the end of the game. And as for the characters, although they're a little one note, they're all pretty fun, and I really liked reading about each of their backstories. All in all, there are really great moments in both of the game's narratives, and I love the way that they're connected. There's also some really cool twists in the end of Village's story, and even if the explanations of some things are a little far-fetched, I do think they're pretty surprising and honestly really bold. For me personally, I would say that I prefer the narrative of Ethan trying to get back his daughter from 5 very misunderstood members of an emo band, rather than trying to find his wife while playing hide and seek with Walter White, as cool as that is. In an industry where almost every sequel is so similar to the first entry but different in a few ways, Village has never really left my mind since I played it back in May of 2021. It doesn't just feel like a reuse of 7's assets, it feels like a love letter to the past of Resident Evil, and also a great step forward for the series, while also serving as a fitting conclusion to the Winters family storyline. Even though it's not necessarily the end because of the DLC, but we'll get into that another time. I have plenty of nitpicks with the story of Village, and I will agree with people that the game overall is less spooky than Resident Evil 7. Just like any other Resident Evil game, I have issues with Village, but if someone would have told me, after playing Biohazard for the first time, that the next game in the series would be another game starring Ethan Winters, and would be one of the best video game sequels of the last decade, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But here I am, making this video. To wrap this all up, I adore this video game. All I'm trying to say is that Resident Evil Village is basically if RE4 and RE7 had a little mold baby, and I will forever love and cherish this near perfect sequel. Thank you, and amen, I guess.